Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Play the Tape. I am your host, Derek J. Fields. Listen, I got another brother here today. You know me now by now. This is season 3. All my sisters and my brothers are very important to me because we have that bond in mental health, substance use, and recovery, and we're always here to share our experience, strength, and hope for those who are or feel that there is no hope. That is our responsibility and our duty for you. And disclaimer, we are not licensed social clinical therapists, or we're not licensed social workers. We're not certified drug and alcohol counselors. Even though I do and I have and will have them on the show to share their perspective on that level. But today, I have my guest. He is a mental health advocate. We met on a NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, Mental Health Expo. And he shared his story, and I was very intrigued, and I wanted to have him up here on Play the Tape. And you can find that on my podcast, on my YouTube channel, on my guest YouTube channel, and on the NAMI YouTube channel as well. Go check out our stories. They're very powerful and inspiring. And we had some interactive guests. But my guest today, like I said, is a mental health advocate, a fellow warrior in this mental health journey. He's a fellow podcaster. He's the host to The Voice for the Voiceless and the creator of the mental health movement, which we will talk about his role that he plays in that later on in the show. My guest today is Chris M. How you doing, brother? Thank you
Good,
for
man.
being here.
Good, Derek. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's an honor.
Yes, it is an honor and pleasure to have you. And I love you, man. And I just thank you for being here and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, sharing your testimony to let people know that there is hope for all aspects of mental health, substance use, and recovery, because that's what Play the Tape touches on, all those aspects of even suicide prevention, even survivors of human trafficking, which we'll probably get in later on as the show progresses. Well, the not this show particularly, but in the platform of Play the Tape. Um, Listen, you can start your testimony wherever you want, my brother. The floor is yours.
So, just really quick before I start, just like a little side note on the "I love you" thing that we were talking about before the podcast. So, when I first met my brother who passed away, Santi, he always said the same thing. After every time we leave, you were like, "Oh, I love you, bro," and I always felt like really uneasy about it because growing up, my mom used those 3 words as a weapon. It was just kind of one of those things that always felt like a knife. I'm like, "Yeah, thanks, bro." And he's like, "I'm gonna get you to say it one day. I'm gonna get you to say it one day." And when I remember the first time I said it, and the shock in his face, it's just like, "Holy shit! I heard you say it, bro." Like what? And I say it to all my friends now, man. Like whenever you say it, it doesn't feel like off base. It doesn't feel uncomfortable. It's just like you really do need to tell the people you care about that you love them, because if his passing taught me anything, it's we all have an expiration date and we don't know when it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I learned how to be comfortable with it too. Um, Growing up, uh, it was show, but really not said so much. And it is an action word. It is a verb, but you could tell when someone means it. You can tell when they'd be like, "Hey, I love you." You could feel it. You know what I mean? You could tell if it's genuine or not as you grow into it and as you accept it for yourself. So I appreciate your brother, for passing on that lesson for you and that hope for you and that word of love and giving that gift to you before he
Yeah,
passed on. I think that's excellent. And my condolences for your brother, and my prayers and my thoughts go out. It's not easy to lose people that we love. So absolutely. But I'm glad he gave you that gift.
yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate the condolences, man. I think to really start the story properly, would probably go back to when my parents got divorced. I was 8 years old, so I understood kind of what was going on, and just knew that mom and dad weren't living together. And as time went on, I had this teacher who I'm still very close with. I met her, I think, in either kindergarten or first grade, and I'm still close to her to this day. She was one of the only people that was there for me when my parents got divorced. You know, they were going through the divorce that was really nasty, because my mom was unfaithful to my dad before they got divorced. I remember when I was 4 years old, I drove my dad. Well, I didn't drive. I showed my dad where this guy lived at that my mom was messing around with. And I was 4 years old, and I remember the detail of the car. I remember the guy's name. It was one of my dad's friends. And I remember telling my aunt about it. And she almost adopted me. And I sometimes I wish she did, just so I could have avoided all the pain that I've been through. But I think with that have been done, I don't think I would have the people that I have in my life right now and be able to share the message that I do now. So it's kind of like a double edged sword. It's like, do I want to avoid the pain? Do I not? So after the divorce, we moved around a lot, mainly because my mom went from relationship to relationship. I'd probably count from the time she was in Florida to when she left for Jersey. We probably moved about 25 times, maybe. That sounds about right. I went to two different middle schools in 1 year, and I went to three different high schools in 1 year because of us moving so much. I really started struggling with just like life in general around like ninth grade. Had my first relationship, if you even call it that, because when you're 14, it's really hard to call something a relationship. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Um, but we dated for like 3 months. Always went out with her parents and her for dinner and bowling and stuff. So when that whole thing ended, I think that's when anger started manifesting itself within my being, because I didn't know how to handle being broken up with. Again, 14 years old. It's a breakup, and in that being that young just kind of doesn't really seem to be that big of a deal. But I found out she was seeing this other guy right before she broke up with me, and that's when things kind of took that little spiral for me. I saw them walking down the hall together, and I broke my knuckle on a lock on a locker. And
When that happened at 14, because at 14, yeah, it's it's a what a 14 relationship is, if we understand relationships. But was there any thought of, man, I know this feeling before, I've seen this movie before?
yep, I always say that my mom was the first woman to break my heart because she used so much of my pain against me, and always love bombed me. And I didn't know of that word until maybe a couple years ago when it started making sense. But when I look back at it now, it's just like, wow, she said I love you, she said I cared, but I don't think she ever really meant it. I think it was just kind of one of those blanket terms for her just to kind of keep me under her thumb kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So after that relationship ended, I got into self harm really bad. And I think it's because of still just things at home not being very stable. My mom just going through multiple relationships. And then my parents always fighting. And I just started becoming really numb to like everything. And I started self harming a lot. Um, I when I started doing that, I started wearing sweatshirts, and I remember the sweatshirt that I wore almost all the time. It was a Insane Clown Posse red jacket. I wore like almost every single day, even in like 95-degree weather. I wore it, and it was to cover my arms. I didn't do it for attention. I didn't want that attention, but it got to a point where I had to start wearing ace bandages because it got so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a couple weeks after the ace bandage incident with one of my friends, she got really upset with me because she found out I was self harming, and I had the means, I had a plan to unalive myself. And just a trigger warning for your listeners on unaliving. Um, I had a rope in my backpack. I was ready. I was done. Just things at home weren't stable. The relationship thing was I didn't know how to handle. I wasn't given really very many tools to cope with hurt, heartbreak, or anything like that.
And there was no one at that time that you could go talk to. There was no
Right,
one that you trusted that you could be like, "Hey, I have there. I need to talk to someone, and I need to talk to someone right now."
right. And I remember almost doing it. I had the rope on the balcony. I was getting ready to jump, and I guess somebody caught wind of it before I even did anything to really hurt myself. Because a resource officer tackled me to the ground, and called my mom. And my mom not sent me away, but she took me to this institution where they had like counselors and stuff to talk about that stuff. The counselor that they paired me with specialized in gambling addiction. So 2 weeks of outpatient therapy um, was pretty much useless. Being 31 years old now, being 14 then, I cannot honestly tell you any piece of information or advice that
Right,
she ever gave that
right.
stood out to me. And again, this is well over 10 years ago. So, those mental health resources and just having that conversation about suicide, it's just like, oh, you have depression, or oh, you almost unalived yourself. Well, I'm here for this and I don't know how to deal with this. So it's just kind of like mental health still being taboo back then. And, after that whole thing happened, after the second week of outpatient therapy and it wasn't working, my mom, I say gave me away, but she sent me to a family friend's house for like 3 months. And I'll never forget what she said when she did. She said, I can't put up with you anymore. And she sent me away for 3 months. I didn't see her. I didn't hear from her, nothing. My dad didn't even know about this.
Where was he at the time this was all
So
going on?
he was around, but my mom did a good job at making me afraid of my father for no reason. Because when I look at him now, and we have conversations about things that happened, he genuinely didn't know about my unalive attempts. Um, he didn't know about a lot of the things that were going on at home because my mom just never cared to communicate any of that stuff with him. It was just more, she was always trying to find ways for me to be afraid of him. And
Mm.
I never told him anything. I never opened up to him about anything because when I opened up to my mom, she would use that stuff against me.
So she was trying to keep you dependent on her to the
Right.
best of her ability. I get you. Okay.
Yeah. And then when I came back to the house finally, we got into a really nasty argument. And I didn't run away, but I like left the house for a couple hours and I was walking down the road and she called the cops on me. Um, the cops said either I could take you to a halfway house or I could take you back home. And I went back home. As soon as the officer pulled out of the driveway, my mom threw me up against the door, my back hitting the doorknob. And I dropped to the ground. She kept kicking me. Um, so after that happened, and I remember the shirt I was wearing. It was a white shirt with blue flames on it, and it was covered in blood. She's like, "Change your shirt. We have guests coming." And I'll never forget that night, just because my brother even told me about that. He's like, "Isn't that the shirt that mom beat you down in?" Like, um, and again, I one of those things that not until therapy now did I realize that was abuse in some form because when you think of abuse, you think of these kids that are like beaten from the second they wake up to when they go to sleep. And it's hard to like identify yourself in that category of abuse because we're told it's this, but it can also be this too. And I was mentally and physically abused by my mom. She broke shit over my head. Those wooden posts off of bunk beds.
Yes.
She broke one of those over my head. Um, and it was just it was nonstop with her. It was always she wanted to be in control. She made my dad to be to be the villain because for whatever reason she couldn't let a divorce go, and this is like 10 years in or something like that by now. And so fast forward into like adulthood. Um, Again, it was just kind of one of those things where I knew I needed therapy, and I always just kind of pushed away because my mom was like, "All right, you need to go to therapy. You need to go to therapy." Anything that she has ever said in her quote unquote advice has always just kind of been like, I don't trust you. and I don't want to do something because of you telling me to do it.
But what do you think that was her conscious speaking, her guilt speaking, or that, hey, listen, I know I did some things to traumatize you as a child, and I know I wasn't there to help as I should because I was dealing with my trauma, and I've learned in my therapy and in my treatment that our parents have trauma too. And it just comes down from generation to generation to generation if it doesn't get addressed, because what was mental health? What
Right.
was going to a therapist or a psychiatrist? You're crazy. You're cuckoo.
Mm-hmm.
I know these are sensitive words for my listeners, but these are the things that it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. You just didn't do these things. So maybe you think that was her way of like, hey, go to therapy. Maybe not. It was just her way of saying I'm sorry, and this is the only way I know I could help.
Right.
You think?
Um, I think my dad had told me. I think it was like a year ago we had this conversation. He told me that she wanted to go to marriage counseling with him
Mm-hmm.
before they got a divorce and everything. And then he's like, but she would tell me all the things that I can't talk about, all the things that I can't say. So, that went off in my head, thinking that she would like try to dig her fingers into that therapy session, into, just like anything in my healing process. So I shut it down. And again, we were in the society at the time of rub dirt in it, be a man, and, just don't even think
Mm-hmm.
twice about it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Um, and it honestly, it was a very long, long time before I ever sought out therapy. And I have regrets on that aspect because I feel like if I would have done it sooner, I think my journey right now would be a little bit easier than it was then. But at the same time, I feel like all the trials and tribulations and stuff that I went through, um, makes whatever's going on right now that much more worth it, because I have a foundation, I have a message, and I have a voice to spread that message. Um, so when I was working at Publix, 6 years of just being, uh, passed up on opportunities or just not given the opportunity to show what I can do, I became bitter and I became really angry because towards the end of my Publix career, I tried going to wrestling school. Um, and going to wrestling school is one of the greatest opportunities I was ever
No.
opened a door for myself.
No shit. I
Yeah,
don't mean to cuss, but no shit for real.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's what's up. I'm sorry. We know we wrestling fans. Listen, people, Sean and Chris and myself, we also have that camaraderie in wrestling as well. So that's why I said it the way I did. But excuse my language, but no shit for real.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Um, so when I went to wrestling school, I was doing really good with the weight cut. I was doing really good with keeping up in the gym and stuff and doing the classes. Now, the problem with me doing wrestling school with the mind that I was going into it with was I couldn't take criticism. I can't take people yelling at my face. Like I didn't do very good with that at all. And while my coach was kind of a asshole to me sometimes, pardon my French, um, I feel that he meant well and he just wanted to make sure that his students got everything right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just didn't appreciate it at the time because of how used to abuse and shit I was at home. So I had my one and only wrestling match at a birthday party with my coach. Um, and it was a great time. I got to throw cayenne pepper in this man's face. I got to take a bump over a tree stump. Like it was a lot of fun, man. It was
Yeah,
one of the best times of my life. I even got to
I bet.
replicate John Cena's comeback. Like it was a lot of fun, man.
Did you ever try to cut? Did you cut some promos? Did you ever
No,
get to? Okay,
no.
okay. Oh, at least try. Okay.
We had a promo class one time, and it was just the prop I was given and the physique that I had just didn't go well with it, so it was just kind of uncomfortable. Um, And I remember when we were starting to like learn moves and stuff, like a hammer lock. And one of my partners was, she's a wrestler now. She's signed in NXT right now. Funny enough,
Awesome.
she was one of my partners, and as a man, I don't feel comfortable like it was consensual because we're in class, but like just in general, like I don't want to be up close to somebody like that. Like I know it's like part of the class and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember him making a comment about it. He's like, I could tell you're like afraid to like do this because she's a girl and stuff. And he like put her in a hammer lock and it was like chest to back. And I don't feel comfortable doing that, man. I don't. Um, and again, I think it was just more my mindset at the time was just kind of like I don't want somebody else to feel uncomfortable, even though it's a consensual thing and we're all here for the same reason. Um, so fast forward a little bit into that class, I tore my shoulder. Um, One of the most heartbreaking freaking times of my life because I remember going into work and I couldn't lift my arm at all, and I was working in the bakery at the time. Um, and I remember having a mixing shift to do the dough and stuff for the day, and those are like 40-pound bags.
Mm.
Um, so I had to try and lift them with one arm and make sure that everything was right and stuff. And I told my manager, I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I cannot lift my arm. Like, I'm gonna hurt myself again. Um, she's like, oh well, so and so is gonna help you, and they never did. And I was in pain the whole day. And I think that's the day that I decided to take off medical leave to heal my shoulder because it was like 6 weeks after surgery. And I went to New Jersey for those 6 weeks so my mom could take care of me. Um, it was My mom did a good job of putting on a show for me and, basically gassing me up saying, oh, how great it is to be in New Jersey. And if you come here, you can save all this money and you can get back on your feet and blah, blah, blah.
How old were you at that time when that transition happened?
I was 25, 26. Yeah, 25, 26, somewhere
How
around there.
how were your relationship with your mom at that time when when you had to make that choice to go back home or go stay with her?
So looking back at it now, I mean, that relationship was still the same. But like I said, her doing a good job at putting on a show and how much better life is up in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went up there, things were okay for a little while. At one point, I was working like 3 jobs, just trying to, you know, put my name out there, build my foundation and stuff.
No therapy at this point just yet.
Still no therapy, right?
Okay.
So I ended up leaving one job, which was FedEx, because I had a 40-pound Cisco box drop and hit me in the back of the head, and I had a mild concussion afterwards. When I said something to that manager, he's like, "Oh, just have your wife or have your mom massage it." Like I was so pissed when he said it, and I don't. And still to this day, I kind of wish I could understand why I was so mad, and I think it's just because of the way it came across was so insulting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I went to the emergency room after my other job because I went from that job right to another one, and I couldn't see straight. I felt horrible, and I was like, "Dude, I think I need to go to the emergency room." So I went to the emergency room, and I had a mild concussion. He's like, you got to stay in bed for like 3 days. You have a mild concussion, and you can't be too careful with concussions." So I wrote out a letter to FedEx, basically about the incident with that manager and getting a concussion and everything. And they tried calling me after that because when my mom dropped off the letter, they tried apologizing, and I was just like, no, like I'm not going to be disrespected. Like that's not okay. Like maybe where you guys come from, where you're an alpha male somewhere, and you think it's okay to degrade somebody because they got hurt. Like no, it's So, um, after I left that job, after I left PetSmart, I just had one job at Thor Labs, which they dealt with like fiber optics and stuff for like the military, for like doctors' offices and stuff. And that job was great. I met a lot of really good people there. A lot of really down to earth people. I love the manager I worked with. They always made sure to give me something new every single day. It was always a learning process there. Um, And I remember trying to go to college when I was up there because I wanted to be I wanted to be a commentator for a wrestler for wrestling because
Okay.
that's one of my dream jobs, or it
Right.
was. And I had a wrestling podcast at the time. Like I was trying to build my brand. Um, so I remember having a conversation with my mom. I'm like, hey, like, can I put like 100 aside from like every paycheck to like try and do this college thing? And I'll never forget the words that she said to me. She's like, we can't afford to lose money from you right now. So yeah, we can't have you not give us that extra $100. Um, so after that happened, I went to one class and I never went back because I was just like, I can't afford this without like having money put aside. Um, so a little bit after that, things were going okay at work for a little while. And I remember me and my mom got into this really bad argument. And I don't remember what started it, but basically, this is how it went. I was downstairs playing whatever game I was playing at the time, and 3 straight hours, Derek, and I'm not exaggerating on the time,
Mm-hmm.
3 straight hours of her yelling, berating me, insulting me, and I didn't say one word the entire freaking time. Um, it was horrible. And I remember every single word she said. I remember how she said it. And it's not one of those things that like I hold on to like a grudge with her. It's one of those things where it's just like when she says something quote unquote nice, I think of that. It's like, well, you said all these things at one time. And those are really hurtful things, you know. And after that, I was in a really bad place in my head. And I tried to unalive myself again. Um, had the means again. I was gonna 100% do it. And I, for some stupid reason, and I think this is because I was again an unhealed, uh, untapped mind of just trauma, not being um, held on to by anybody to help me get through it.
Yeah. It wasn't released. You didn't have a place to release it healthy and talk about it to unpack it. It was
Right,
just pushed down and just condensed inside.
right. Um, and I was working an overnight job at that time, and I stayed up for 3 straight days. I didn't sleep, not 5 minutes, not 2 minutes. I didn't sleep at all. And my plan was my job was over an hour away. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to make sure I was way too tired to drive. And I wrote a note on Facebook. It was a suicide note. As soon as I wrote it, I read it over again. I'm like, I don't want this kind of attention, man. I just don't. And I deleted it. But right after I deleted it, I got 2 messages. One message was from my now tattoo artist, Rochelle, and Santi, who I've known since high school, but we were never that close. We always knew of each other. We always acknowledged each other whenever we came across each other's Facebook. And he
Was that
called me.
that first interaction y'all had to build that brotherhood?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's like, I just want you to know I saw your Facebook post, and I want you to know that you're seen and I'm here for you, whatever you need. And we started talking about what was going on. And, he basically talked me off that cliff. Um,
How did that make you feel to know two people that you didn't know that well? Hey, we see you, we hear you, we're here for you. How, if you can remember, because that at that point, you had been through so much trauma, so much of a couple of unalive attempts for two people that you barely knew to reach out to you. Man, what did that do at that moment? What did that do for Chris?
so I can tell you right now, just as you were saying that, I have goosebumps. Um, just thinking about that because it was two people I didn't know pretty much at all. Um, just having somebody say that they actually care and not have a motive behind those words. My mom would say that she cares and she loves me, but there would always be intention behind all her words, and none of them were ever sincere. Besides, like, I always felt like everything nasty she's ever said to me, she's always meant. Like, if we ever got into a disagreement, she would call me a piece of shit like my father. She said that to me probably over 20 times. Um, One of the most notable things that she said to me in that 3 hour screaming fit that she had was, I hope your brother has more success than you. You don't deserve shit. You're not going to amount to nothing. And that's one thing that sticks out to me, because everything that I do is just one of those metaphoric punch in the face to her that, hey, I'm doing this because of me, not because of your helping hand, not because of your money, nothing. Like, everything that I have here, everything that I've built is because of me, and not has nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
She may have been the not motivation. She may have been the reason that I speak out and spread the message that I spread, because of how much hurt that I've endured from her. But she's not responsible for anything here, like nothing at all. Um, so when I came back to Florida, the very first dinner that I had, well, hold on, let me back up to the unalive attempt. Sorry. Um,
Yeah, they reached out to you, and
yeah.
they saw you, heard you, and understood.
So that was the first time that I actually had somebody reach out to me like that and tell me that they were there for me and reach their hand out for me. So that was the first time that I ever pursued therapy. Um, I went to this therapist for 3 months. The very first two sessions that we had, I couldn't look at her in the face because I was crying like through both sessions. I couldn't look at her in the face, and my eyes were always to the ground, and it was awful. Um, as we progressed to our very last session, where I made the decision to come back to Florida, she's like, I just want you to know that the amount of progress you've made in this short amount of time is incredible. Like, you went from not being able to look me in the face to I shaved my whole face and shaved my head at the time, and you could see my whole face. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, I inspired her because most people, and I think you can attest to this too, most people, when they're trying to seek that healing journey at first, don't want to put in the work. It's not most, some people, when they start their healing journey, they just want something to happen overnight and want that instant gratification of, well, I'm going to therapy. Why isn't it working? And it's only been like 2 sessions. Um, and after that last session, and when I told her the news that I wanted to go back to Florida to get away from my mom, and I genuinely believe that if I would have stayed in Jersey, I would have gone through with unaliving myself. And just for the simple fact that the whole situation with my mom was so toxic, it was so bad. Like, every single day we would fight. Her relationship with the guy she was with at the time was starting to fail because she was starting to show her true colors, like she always does in her relationships. And when I came back to Florida, I had a dinner with my grandparents, which were my mom's parents. And first thing my grandfather says, and I don't know what drove him to say this, and it kind of pissed me off at the time when he said it. He's like, I didn't know what to expect when you were coming back. It was just kind of like, are you running away from your problems up there? Or, like, I didn't know what version of Christopher I was going to see.
Mm.
Uh, so I started working in this AC job. Um, didn't really pay anything. And then I
What,
finally found,
where you at this time when you started working your AC job?
so I moved back with my dad. I moved with my dad. Um, and that relationship was very damaged because of my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And we always butt heads because he's very emotionally numb to like everything, so it made everything a lot worse between us, because anytime I would try to express how I was feeling about something, it would always be shut down with oh, well, I did this and this, so why can't you do it? And just
Yeah.
kind of one of those man up, rub dirt in it mentalities is what he is.
Right.
And then I finally found this tech data job that I'm at right now, which is IT security. And I finally found therapy for myself when I finally got health insurance there. And this is the therapist before the one I have now. I had 2 sessions with her. Both sessions, she wrote nothing down. No words of like comfort, no words of like anything. Um, the first session, she gave me like a pamphlet of like like a healthy diet because obviously gut health and mental health kind of go hand in hand with each other. And I know
Mm-hmm.
she meant well with it, but it was just kind of one of those very insincere therapists. The second session we had was she started off with like, "Would you take medicine for your mental health?" And I said, "I really don't want to take medicine. Like I don't feel like I need it. Like I'm not that bad to where I think I need medicine just to get by." And her response immediately was just kind of, "Well, would you take it for a high blood pressure?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I guess because it's for my health, it's for high blood pressure." And then she kind of gave me like that side eyed look. I'm like, "Oh, well, you said it's for your health. Why wouldn't you take mental health pills and stuff like that?" So, had my first anxiety attack when I started talking about things that were going on, and in the middle of me like venting what I was going through, she cut me off like mid sentence, mid tears and everything, saying that's all the time we have right now.
Mm,
And
mm.
she sent me a text message after that and said that she's booked up for the next couple weeks, and she's like, "You need to find another therapist."
Real quick,
Yeah,
I say, uh, you like, Derek, why are you saying like that? Well, I get that from my mama. She's anytime something goes on, she'd be like, I'm just disgusted with that. What I'm hearing, she'd go, mm. So because that's and a lot of listeners and viewers, I'm pretty sure, including myself, can relate to what Chris is saying. I've dealt with that where there's no care, there's no humanity. You're just a number, or you're just another time frame on my agenda or my to-do list that I got to get to, and I may or may not be able to get to it. Understanding that, not understanding the importance of you are a human being, we all are human beings, and understanding that if that was them or a family member, how pissed off she would have been. Wait a minute, you're going to treat my son, my daughter, my mother, my father, my family member like this? How dare you? They're coming for you for help and you're treating them like this. This is life or death. Because she would have been responsible for anything that would have happened to you later on that day or
right.
that week because of the way she treated you or not treated you. But I don't want people that are listening, that are viewing, to give up. That's the point of what Chris is. I think that's the point of what Chris is saying, that he didn't let that stop him. And I wanted to ask you, how did you get to going to therapy at that time? What was the moment of clarity, let's say, to motivate you? And then what made you go back after that experience?
So, I was waiting for my health insurance to kick in at the tech data job, and I knew I needed to pick back up on therapy because I feel like if you start something, you can't just cold turkey it and just, not give it more effort. And my friend, her kids went to that therapist and said that they were great because it was kind of one of those like psychologist centers where they have multiple therapists and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And she happened to be one of them. And like I said, that was an awful experience. And just to say this phrase, this wasn't like I didn't give up completely on myself, but I gave up on therapy for a little bit because of that experience was really bad. Um, and then I just kind of carried that experience with me for a little while until, ironically enough, a NAMI representative showed up at our job to do like a mental health thing. And I pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, man, like I was going to ask this question, but I don't feel comfortable talking about this stuff out loud just because I feel like therapy sessions, like, unless you're really, really like in tune with yourself and confident with what you're doing in your journey at the time, I wasn't confident with anything I was doing. And I said I didn't want to talk about therapy with a bunch of people I don't know. And I told him, I said, how do you even go about looking for another therapist? And I told him how bad of an experience I had with this last one. And, he's like, you got to ask questions with every therapist that you go to, if it's more than one, and see what they cover, see how they can help you. Do they offer medicine? And, you just, when you ask questions to these therapists, you can kind of get an idea of if this person's right for you. And he's like, sometimes it takes more than one session to figure out whether or not that therapist is right for you. So after that, I took into account of what he said, and greatly appreciate the guy. And I wish I can remember his name because he forever gave me that motivation to look for another therapist. I was looking through. I went on Psychology Today is how I discovered my therapist, and came across the first person that I saw on there who looked genuine, and her name was Jess, the therapist I have now. And the day I was supposed to start therapy, a very close friend of mine passed away, like the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had my first session, I'm like, I can't even begin to tell you like how much I needed this therapy session because I just had a friend pass away. And she only offered virtual therapy, and still does. And it's very different for me because I'm more of a face-to-face person.
Yeah, me too.
But
Me too.
with the pandemic, we kind of had to get used to that virtual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And fast forward into like 2020, I had a very close friend of mine pass away during the pandemic, and this was a time that we couldn't see the being of the person during COVID after they passed away because couldn't attend funerals with a physical being there. Um, and my friend Santi was ironically enough there for me when she passed away, helping me grieve with her, ultimately preparing for his passing the year after. Um, and
It's okay.
when he passed away, I was in shock for like 20 minutes. I didn't know how to react because it didn't feel real. And my friend called me. It was like 12 at midnight, and he's just like, Santi just passed away. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's midnight. I'm like, half asleep, don't know what the hell's going on. I'm like, no, he didn't. Like, he didn't pass away. He's like, yeah, he did. Him and Keisha got into a car accident. And after we hung up the phone, I just remember sitting on my couch for like 5 minutes, just not knowing how to react. And I called my brother. I said, I really need somebody here right now. I was in probably like the worst possible mindset I could have possibly been in. And I guess he was being cautious during COVID because his girl caught COVID and he didn't want to get too close to me and give it to me or whatever. So I couldn't hug him. I couldn't, we couldn't embrace each other. And I just couldn't let any of my emotions out to him. And one of our mutual friends who's really close to all of our group, Sage, came by. Like, he didn't call, message, or nothing. He just stopped by with his friend. And he's like, I really just wanted to come and check on you because he knew what Santi meant to me. I've never ran into anybody's arms, never mind a grown-ass man who's twice the size of me. And I remember just completely falling apart when I saw Sage, and I just remember this is not real. This isn't real. And I've never cried that hard in my life. Everything that I do, between the podcast, between the group, has been for both of them. Has been for Amy, has been for Santi, and they were, ironically enough, she was one of the first members in the mental health group on Facebook. He was one of the biggest supporters of the group and, pushing to do a podcast. And I started doing the podcast after he passed away. And I think that was a way of me healing from his passing because it was probably the biggest loss I've ever suffered in my life was Santi, because he quite literally saved my life. He reached his hand out to me when nobody else could give a shit less if I was on the gutter. It's
Hmm.
he was that guy. He was that brother to me, that light, that breathed air into my life. He helped me so damn much, man. And I remember for a long time, I just wish I could have traded my life for his, because he has kids. He had a fiance that just got engaged right before he passed away, and I just sometimes it's really hard for me to process that he's gone, because all the good things that have been going on in my life, like doing this podcast, meeting the people I've met, like yourself, and in a lot of senses, you remind me a lot of him, because you're a very wholesome being, and you spread that love out to everybody, and I genuinely do appreciate you, man. I really truly do.
Thank you. I appreciate you too, brother. And that's what we do. That's our purpose. That is our calling, is to spread that message of love, faith, and hope to people, um, to those who struggle with the trials and tribulations of this world, which are going to happen, the loss and the grief, but also let them know that there's joy, everlasting joy, and there's perfect perseverance. When that perseverance builds character, and that character turns into hope, and that's what we do. That's what we both do. And I thank you for seeing that, and I see it in you as well. And I want to honor that. And I always tell my guests, especially those, I tell all my guests, because all my guests are in service, and I thank you for your service. And what I mean by that is you being vulnerable, you having courage to tell your story, to share it with those who you're the voice for the voiceless. I appreciate that. So I want you to come back, maybe next week at some point, because I want to get into your podcast. I want to get into the mental health movement, and I want to ask you some more questions about your recovery journey and the things that you do that has helped sustain your mental health stability from all the trauma that you've been through, with all the loss that you've been through. I want to get that part of your story as well. So we got about 6 minutes. So real quick, Chris, how can people find your podcast, and how can people get connected with the mental health movement? We're going to talk more
So
about it. We're going to talk more about it next time you're up here, but I just want to get people to be able to get connected with you in the fellowship in your community.
sure. So the podcast you can find on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. Just type in mental health movement and then just voice for the voiceless after. And you should be able to find it right away. It says podcast by Chris. As for the Facebook group, mental health movement as well, it's a nice little fist, and has the purple and blue hearts, and the suicide awareness semicolon on it. So it's pretty easy to find on there. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok under the same name. Um, and yeah, man, like I said, I greatly appreciate you having me on here.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're up here. I always ask my guests, because I started to do this because I started to do this when I went to speak in HNIs, which hospitals and institutions. We'll go into treatment facilities, psychiatric units, and correctional facilities. And I always ask my brothers and sisters, I say, listen, a lot of stuff that we talk about is heavy. A lot of things that we share is heavy. Let's end it on an upbeat, on some gratitude. So give me two things that you're grateful for. And the reason that I do this is because when life is lifing, when life happens on life on its own terms, trials and tribulations, ups and downs, ebbs and flows of life, when life gets heavy, let's look at the glass as half full. Let's concentrate more on our blessings, because I know the type of person that I am, and that I am trying to become less of, is a person that I always focus on what I don't have. I'm trying to become a person that I focus on what the blessings that God has given me and be thankful of them. So when life does rain, when the storm does come, I can hold on to these things and be thankful for, and that can bring my joy. Not happiness, because happiness is fleeting, but
Right.
that can bring my joy. So, what are a couple things that Chris holds on, and we can elaborate on them on the next time that you're here? Because I would love for you to come back on next week. What are two things that Chris holds on when he needs to hold on to? What is two great things that you're grateful for?
So, number one being just my mental health journey as a whole. I feel like without the therapy and without all the things that I've been able to do with my platform, I truly am grateful for this journey and all the people that I have met on it, because it has given me the ability to be a light for those in the darkness. So super grateful for the mental health journey as a whole. Um, and the second thing, and I know this, I don't know if it might be corny to say or not, but the second thing that I hold really dear to my heart is music. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Music has gotten me through some of the darkest times in my life. And, being my number one artist of all time, Linkin Park, I have his signature tattooed on me. I have lyrics and their band logo. And Linkin Park has been something that has kept me going pretty much my entire life. Music is my being, and I'm always looking for those subliminal messages in every song that I listen to. Before growing up, it was just more I needed to hear people screaming in my ear, let all that pain out, because that's what I needed to do. Just didn't know how to express it. Now I can go into therapy sessions, be like, I just heard this song, and I really want you to hear this line because it really spoke out to me.
Mm.
And music has given me ways to explain things about myself that I was never able to articulate properly. So music is my absolute number two.
I like that. And I appreciate that. I like music as well. My number one uh is just, of course, my higher power, who I choose to call God, Christ. Uh I wouldn't be here without the grace of God. I just wouldn't. I didn't save myself. There was no man or woman that saved me. Um, and God saved me for this purpose right here, and for another calling that I have on my life to be a teacher of the word, and I'm learning how to accept that. It's not easy, um, because I wanted to do what Derek wants to do. That's part of the mental health and obsessive and compulsive addiction disease that I have. That's a part of my brain and this flesh, but that's number one. I'm just grateful. Number two is humor. I love laughter. Like music for you, laughter and comedy is something that saved my life. On top of my higher power. Um, Anytime that I'm down and I'm out, I love laughing. I love laughing. I love watching a good comedy, a good joke, a good sketch, a good skit.
What's your
Uh,
favorite comedy?
Oh man. Okay. So it okay, it just depends. I'm cool with rom-coms. I like goofy comedy like Airplane or Naked
Yep.
Gun. I'm an old school now. I'm a Mr. Bean fan. I grew up on Mr. Bean, like on PBS. Like he would come on Mr. Bean and he didn't talk. He would mumble every now and then, but he was a very physical slapstick comedian. I grew up on the I Love Lucy's and the Carol Burnett's and the Bob Hopes, and then um, the Martin Lawrence's, and then Maria Bamford's, and it's Steve Martin's, and the Dave Chappelle's, and the Patrice O'Neill's, and then improv, Second City. You know what I mean? Like, and then of course wrestling, but humor is my thing. I love funny. I used to do comedy. I did comedy for 8 years, and I was on my way. I started touring with one of a well known comic. Um, well known. And when he would come to Texas, he would want me to open up for him. And my addiction got in the way. But that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be doing this. So I love comedy. I love humor. One person came up to me one time and was like, I was having one of the worst days. She was a nurse, one of the worst days I could ever have. And just coming here and listening to your nonsense, uh, just she was like, I was like, okay.
I love it. I love it.
So, but hey, listen, I love you. I want you back up here next week to elaborate on your gratefulness, to elaborate more on mental health movement, the voice for the voiceless, and let's talk about more of what got you into treatment, how you handled your trauma, because I have so many other questions for you, and I want you to elaborate on the things that you do to help your mental health recovery sustain itself. So that's
Sure,
what
man.
we'll talk about next time. But listen, I love you, Chris.
Love
I'm
you too,
so
man.
grateful for you and I'm thankful for you. But until next time, brother, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.
All right, peace. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we do here at Play the Tape. We thank you for listening and viewing, however you may be doing that, whatever platform that you choose to use. Um, we're thankful. If no one hasn't told you today that they love you, I love you. We love you. And most importantly, God loves you. Understand that there are people like myself, like Chris and my other guests, that will jump in that pit with you because we know the way out. I know that sounds absurd, but that's what we will do. That is our responsibility. That is our duty. We have to. It was given to us freely and we have to give it back. We keep what we have by giving it away. And we do it willingly. We do it eagerly. And we do it without reciprocation. That's just who we are. Listen, with peace comes understanding. With understanding comes love. With love comes hope. And with hope comes recovery. It's an exciting time here at Play the Tape. And it's only going to get better. Until next time, peace.